If we ever wanted to have anything, then you got to go out and work for it. I started work when I was 7 years old, sweeping floors in a beauty salon. After school, my mother was always out working, so we basically were on our own.
Let me welcome Steve Varsano, entrepreneur and jet expert.
When did you come about to start selling airplanes?
One of the customers used to come in and he used to have a jet on his tie. Now, well, how come you have a jet there? And he said, I sold jets. Eventually, I convinced him to introduce me to his boss. That's how I sort of got into the first step of getting a job to sell planes.
What was your relationship with the school during this period?
When a graduation came, I graduated in the bottom 10% of my class.
Can you describe your very first jet sale?
So we get on the plane, we signed all the documents. I had my fancy suit on. I thought, wow, this is the life. And they said, Steve, listen, we need to have a conversation with you about something. And they said, yeah, well, we need to get a commission to help you get this deal done. Are you crazy? I said, the deal's done. And he reaches into his jacket pocket and he pulled out, scared shitless. I was so scared. And we walk into the terminal to call my office. As I'm calling, the lady behind the counter, she said to the guy, excuse me, I need your credit card for the gas for the jet. As soon as he did that, I dropped the phone, I ran out the other door. I got on the plane, they closed the door.
If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, what would you say to yourself?
Well,
what do I need to know about you, Steve, to understand how you became the person who's sitting in front of me today?
I started out really as with a mother with no father, and she basically worked 2 jobs her whole life, bringing up 4 kids. And if we ever wanted to have anything, we either had to go work for it or steal it. So basically, I started work when I was 7 years old, sweeping floors in a beauty salon after school on Friday and all day Saturday. And I don't know, from a very young age, I had a little bit of cash in my pocket to go and buy little things, stupid things, but I always had the ability to go and buy a toy or something like that. So I've always worked my whole life, and I just have come to realize that you really can't ever count on anybody giving anything to you, and that's one of my biggest mindsets. Is if you want anything, you got to go out and work for it.
What was your relationship with your mom?
I was very close. I mean, I respected her so much because she worked so hard to support 4 kids. And they got divorced when I was 5 years old. So, I never really had a mentor as a father. And my mother was always out working. So we basically were on our own. If we were free to do what we wanted to do. And in a way, people would think, wow, you're so lucky you could do whatever you want to do and you had no restrictions or guidance or anything like that. But it's just the opposite because, you have to figure out, it's like being left in the desert in the middle of nowhere and figure out how you go find water, how do you go find shelter. And you had nobody to sort of guide you because she was just working so hard. Did
you feel lost during that period?
It's hard to go back and think about how I felt at that time because, I was just a little kid. But I don't look at it that way. I looked at it as, just being street smart and learning how to survive, out there in the jungle because not literally the jungle, but, literally to survive and figure out how to get through life on your own.
What was your relationship with the school during this period?
Well, at the beginning, it was fine because I used to go to school all the time. But as I started going through my high school in America, which is really from 9th to 12th grade, so you're probably pretty much between 13 and 17 or 14 and 18. And then I was working more and more. So I was working in a restaurant as a waiter, a dishwasher, then eventually to a cook, a chef. And I was working so much that I actually, toward the end of my years in those years in school, I wasn't going to a lot of my classes because I was working, and I would just go to the classes I liked. So when a graduation came, I graduated in the bottom 10% of my class because I never really went to what they call the homeroom where you go and you sign in. And so everybody thought I was always absent, but I would just go to the classes that I wanted to go to. So I really wasn't driven so much in school because it just seemed boring to me.
What did your mom think about that?
Well, it's funny because she just really thought everybody had to go and do what they had to do to get through life. So she knew I was working. She knew I was trying to make some money, and she didn't really see at the time, the importance of being in school every day, working, going to university, things like that.
You then, if we move a bit forward, bought something called a Benson gyrocopter as a teenager. How did that come about? If we move from the period where was that the period where you had all those jobs, or when was that?
Yeah, so when I was 14, a friend of mine, I was at his house, and his older brother was going up for a flying lesson. And he asked me if we wanted to come for a ride, because it's a little 4-seater airplane, and he had 2 seats in the back. And he said, "You want to come up for a ride?" And I just couldn't even imagine what it was like to be in an airplane. So I said, "Of course." And we went up in this small little plane, and I just fell in love with it. It was just, wow, you're up there so free. You're flying over the city, and it was just an amazing, amazing feeling. And at that moment, this light bulb just went off my head. Well, I want to be a pilot. I want to fly. I want to be in aviation. So it was something that just, struck me at that moment. And I went back and I started, I was working already as a waiter, a dishwasher, and things like that. And so I would work 2, 3, 4 weeks to go, rent an airplane with an instructor when I was 14 years old. So when I got to be around 16, I saw this gyrocopter, and I think it was a magazine called Popular Mechanics, I think it was. And it was such a cool thing, but it was just a metal frame with a pole in the back and a big rotor on the top, and it had a lawnmower engine in the back, and it would push you forward. And I thought it was so cool, and I bought it, and it wasn't completely finished, so I had to build it in my backyard in New Jersey, where I lived. And I rolled it down the street, and I was just gonna taxi it down the street, and try it out. And then I got a little bit more gutsy, and I pulled back the lever, and I started flying with this thing. Of course, I was already learning how to fly an airplane, so I had some idea what I was doing. And I got up in the air, but it's literally like flying in a lawn chair. I mean, it was just nothing, and I scared the hell out of myself. I landed on the front yard of the school, and I said, wow, I almost killed myself. And I pushed it back up to my house, and I actually sold it. I traded it for a car, and that was literally my first airplane sale.
When did you come about to start selling airplanes? How did that happen?
So after I finished university, which I got a degree in aeronautical studies at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, which is sort of the only total aviation university in the world that's in Daytona Beach, Florida, and another campus in Arizona. I graduated from there. I became a lobbyist on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., representing the airplane manufacturers. It was a great job, walking through the halls of Congress and Senate, trying to protect the legislative laws that are being set against aviation. But the money was really terrible. It was a great job, but it wasn't paying a lot of money. So I got a job at night in a nightclub that my roommate owned at the time. And during that time I was in the nightclub, one of the customers used to come in, and he used to have a jet on his tie pin. And I, well, how come you have a jet there? And he said, I sold jets. I said, what do you mean you sell jets? That's crazy. He said, yeah, I sell jets. And in those days, they used to have paychecks. And then now today, they don't have them. And he used to come in every once in a while, and he would show me the commission check he made on selling a plane. And after a few months, he showed me some of these commission checks. And I said, wow, where do you work? I want to come and get a job there. No, we're not hiring anybody. And eventually, I convinced him to introduce me to his boss. And that's how I sort of got into the first step of getting a job to sell planes.
Didn't you work there for free at first?
Yeah, because the guy said, why would I hire you? You have no experience in sales. And I said, well, I know everything about aviation. I'm working on Capitol Hill, representing the industry. I'm young. I'm hungry. I'm passionate about this space. And he said, yeah, but you don't have any history of selling anything. So I said, listen, I'll tell you what, I'll work for you for free. You don't have to pay me anything. And when I sell an airplane, you can pay me. So you have nothing to lose. So he agreed to do that. And of course, in those days, that was unheard of. Yeah. And I got the job for free. And so I quit my job as a lobbyist, and then I got a job as a waiter at night in a restaurant so that I could actually have rent to pay for my apartment. So it took me 9 months to sell my first airplane, and it was very, very discouraging. I was going to give up so many times because I didn't think it was for me. It was so difficult. People wouldn't talk to you. They wouldn't call you back. I didn't know what I was talking about. You didn't really get a chance to see people face to face in those days. Everything was on a telephone, and they had telex machines. You probably don't even know what a telex machine is, but it was even before regular rotary phones, before fax machines. It was a long time ago, and it was just a very difficult period. But in my head, I said, okay, I can't give up until I sell at least one airplane. I am not going to be a loser. No matter how long this takes, I'm going to stick it out. I'm going to push. I have to sell one airplane, and then I can quit. At least I could say I sold an airplane. And finally, after 9 months, I sold one airplane.
I saw that in a previous podcast, you talked about that period and talked about the attitude of being humble. How did that period humble you?
Well, it's pretty easy because at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm sitting on the telephone trying to sell somebody a jet for $2, $3, $4 million, which today is like $50 million. And 2 hours later, somebody's yelling at me because I didn't refill his coffee cup because I was a waiter at night. So, it was a very humbling experience because I realized, listen, this is your job. You are selling airplanes. You're not the buyer. You are not the rich guy. You're serving this community of people who need airplanes, the big corporations and the wealthy people. And at nighttime, I was, serving food and running back and forth, getting yelled at for not filling coffee. It was, a slap in your face, like saying, hey, this is not your life up here in the jet world. You're really, and down here with everybody else. And there was nothing wrong with that, but it gave me the humbleness to realize that don't act like somebody that you're working around. You're just servicing that client base.
Do you think that's important to get that perspective?
There's no question about it. There really is no question about it, because one of the most terrible traits of a human being is arrogance. I mean, there's ego, there's greed, but arrogance is really a terrible trait. Nobody likes an arrogant person. And, I don't think there's a different way to be convincing or forceful. And I think that's really combining confidence, with humbleness. And it's not arrogant. I mean, you can be confident when you're talking something, but you be arrogant is rude. It's usually for people that don't deserve, shouldn't be arrogant, but they are arrogant, which makes it even doubly bad to have to deal with people that way.
Can you describe your very first jet sale, if you take us through the full context?
Yeah, it was a mind-boggling experience. So in America, there's basically 6 states in the United States where you have to close a deal for tax purposes. So this one case, we were in North Carolina. So we were meeting the client there with the jet. The jet was $3,100,000. Which again, like today, is $50 million airplane. And I was 24 years old, and I thought, like, wow, I never even been on a private jet at that time, and we're meeting the 2 representatives of a South American buyer, and they came to meet me in North Carolina, where we signed all the documentation. They accepted the plane. We were going to fly the plane to Miami, where the money was going to be transferred while we were flying. And once we got to Miami, the deal was going to be confirmed closed. And they were taking the airplane back to South America, and I was going to get on an airline and fly back to Washington, D.C., where I was working. So we get on the plane, we sign all the documents, we're flying to Miami, and the 2 guys are sitting across from me, and I'm talking, 1 meter, not even 1 meter away. I mean, it's a small little jet, like being in the back of a Viano or a small little van. And they said, Steve, listen, we need to have a conversation with you about something. And I'm sure, what do you want to talk about? I was feeling like, the coolest guy in the
Yeah,
world. I'm
you
selling
did
a
very
$3
first
million
sale, yeah.
plane. I had my fancy suit on. I'm drinking a scotch. I thought, wow, this is the life. And they said to me, listen, we need to talk to you about our fee. I said, what do you mean your fee? And they said, yeah, well, we need to get a commission to help you get this deal done. Are you crazy? I said, the deal's done. It's closed. It's finished. They said, well, yeah, well, we want to get paid. Like, you're representing the buyer. I mean, are you crazy? I can't pay you. You're representing the buyer. No, well, we want to get, a fee. And I asked them how much they wanted. They told me how much they wanted. And it's like, that's the whole amount that my company made. I mean, you're nuts. There's no money here for you. I said, okay, don't worry about it. Listen, when we get to the country we were going to, they said, when we get there, we'll get it all worked out and you go home. I'm like, no, you guys, you're crazy. I'm not going down to South America. I'm getting off of Miami. The deal's closed. We're finished. He said, no, Steve, you don't understand. And he reaches into his jacket pocket and he pulled out. There was no telephones, mobile phones in those days. So we landed in Miami and he told me, come on, let's go. And we're going to call your office and get this money sent. I was shaking. I thought I was going to die. And we went into the private plane terminal. It's called the fixed base operator, which is the terminals where all the private jets go. And we walk into the terminal and I put my little 10 cents into the telephone booth to call my office. And as I'm calling, the lady behind the counter, she said to the guy, excuse me, I need your credit card for the gas for the jet. So the guy turned around to go and walk maybe 5 meters away to give her the credit card. And as soon as he did that, I dropped the phone, I ran out the other door. There was a taxi outside. I jumped in a taxi. I said, quick, I have to get a flight. It was Miami International Airport on this other side. I said, I got to get a flight. I gave him, the money. I said, quick, go. And I went to the other side of the airport. I called my office. I said, did you get all the money? Is the deal closed? Yeah, it's okay. Why? What happened? I said, okay, thank you very much. I hang up and I'm hiding behind all these big concrete poles and in the columns in the Miami airport. And in those days, they didn't have the metal detectors at the airport. I went right to the gate. I'm trying to find my plane. I got on the plane. They closed the door. My God, I escaped. I was scared, shitless. I was so scared. I was shaking. Why I continued this business, I don't know. But I thought this is impossible. This can't be what the normal thing is. And then, of course, after it happens, you sort of laugh about it. You think it was cool, it was funny. And I said, okay, let me do one more deal because, I got to prove this isn't the norm. And I did another one and here I am 45 years later.
What made you decide to start your own company, Soundjets?
Listen, it was late in my life, really, because I've worked for a lot of people most of my life. I worked for a corporate private equity takeover guy from Wall Street for many, many years. And he was, one of these early billionaires. And he had me, I worked, 18, 20 hours a day, but I was, looking at companies to buy. We had a whole flight department with multiple jets. We were flying around the world. It was a very important position dealing with the top people of industries. And but I missed the airplane business. And that was really my passion. So here I was doing corporate acquisitions for this guy and dealing with the top level people of business. And I just thought, you know what? I want to get back into selling airplanes. And from the point I was at working for this guy and from selling airplanes from before, there's no way I could go back and work for somebody. And I just felt, I have enough experience now. And I had this idea, this dream of building a store, a showroom to sell jets. And that was because the demographics of where buyers were not like they used to be, because it used to be most of the people, 80% of the jet owners in those days were in the United States. And then it went down to 50% when I decided to go back to selling airplanes, because all of these new countries, not new countries, but all these countries that started becoming emerging markets and frontier markets that never really, they didn't even have bread on the supermarket shelves, let alone having jets. I mean, places like in Russia and China and Nigeria, India. And they were really developing in these days in the early, in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so it was harder to go see clients. So I came up with the idea I wanted to build a store, a showroom to get clients to come and see me. And there's no way that nothing existed like that, of course. So I just thought, okay, I have to go do it myself. And I had a little bit of money saved up, and I said, I'm going to try and do it. I actually started thinking about it in 2009, which was a really crazy time because, first of all, people thought it was a stupid idea having a store to sell jets. And second of all, it was right after the financial crisis happened. And everybody was thinking, nobody's going to ever buy a corporate jet again because the industry's dead. The businesses are really fell down. It was late 2008 when the financial crisis happened. So it was a stupid time in most people's eyes to do it. But, at the time I'm in my 50s and I said, when is the best time? I mean, I can't. What am I going to wait for until I'm in my 60s? 70s, so it's like Nike says, just do it. Why, if you're going to start, if you say, I want to be on a diet, I'm going to start next week. If you're going to be on a diet, start now. What do you start next week? I don't understand that. So I wanted to build this showroom and I said, screw it. I'm going to do it. I don't care what anybody says to me. If I lose, I go out of business, fine. People don't understand that failure is not really the opposite of success. Failure is really a part of success. It's how you get to success. And you're going to have a lot of failures in your life. And you have to just brush yourself up, get up and try it again.
That way of looking at failure, did you learn that from, was the guy you worked for? Did you learn it from him or did you learn it like through your own failures or how did you get that perspective?
Listen, obviously when you're trying to sell airplanes, you're having failure every day. You're talking to people that hang up on you. You got a deal you think is going to close. You might work on it for a couple months and somebody changes their mind. When I was working in Washington, D.C. in Capitol Hill, you're trying to get a legislation passed and somebody just cuts it from underneath you and you lose. So it was, you learn how to have a thicker skin when people, punch you or shoot you or stab you. You sort of just have to brush it off and you just have to get on with life. This world is not a pleasant place in most ways. The world's in a very difficult atmosphere and you just can't let the negativeness bother you because if you turn on the television and watch the news, you're going to be the most depressed person in the world, even though none of that stuff really affects you, but you just get depressed about it. You can't think about all this negative in the world, and you can't think about negative that's even around you. You have to just keep thinking positive and keep moving forward. You have to be driven to have a purpose and don't let anything stop you from trying to reach that purpose.
I listened to another podcast where you discussed a specific scenario where you leased a plane or someone wanted you to lease a plane to them and said it was for lobsters and wanted to pay in full cash. Can you take us back to that scenario and give us like the full context of what happened, what was going to do?
Well, in the old days, today you can't get away with this because, you can't have a lot of cash around today. It doesn't work. But this is going back a long time ago. Must be 30 years ago. And maybe even more, 35 years ago. And this guy, wanted to lease an airplane, and I said, okay, we're going to go look at the airplane. So he flew up. He had his own small twin-engine airplane, and he said, I'll pick you up, and we'll fly up to go see the plane because it wasn't far. I was in Washington, and the airplane was in New Jersey, and I forgot where he was coming from, but he came and picked me up in Washington, and we flew to go see the plane. And so after we went to see the plane, we were flying back. He said, I'm going to take the plane. I said, okay, fine. But, you have to get a credit check and, they're going to want to do a credit check to make sure you can make the payments and about your business and everything. And, he told me that, listen, we deal with cash a lot of times because we actually, transport, a lot of fish and lobsters and stuff from Miami, from the Isle of the Caribbean and Bahamas and stuff. You deal in cash and you're bringing planes from, the Bahamas. Sounds a little fishy. I listen, I don't know what to tell you, but they're not going to approve, credit if you don't have any, balance sheet, you don't have any financial statements. And literally, it's in a little small twin-engine airplane, but he reaches back, he's flying, he reaches back and behind the seat that I'm sitting in here, and he pulls out a briefcase, and he gives me the briefcase, And I said, what's this? And I open it up, and it's just full of cash. Yeah. He said, listen, here is 1 year's payments of the lease payments for the airplane. So they don't need a credit check because I'm paying everything in advance. I said, you crazy? I was like, really? Are you crazy? You're giving me, you want me to count this? I mean, it was just stacks and stacks of money. I said, I can't take this. I said, and by the way, no way I'm going to walk out of this plane with this briefcase. Yeah. And what am I going to do? Go take a taxi to the airport with all this cash and fly back? Are you nuts? I said, I'm not going to do this. Anyway, I convinced him he had to wire transfer the money. Eventually, he did wire transfer the money. We did get the lease done. And 4 months later, they found the airplane crashed in the Amazon of Brazil.
Jesus.
So it was, but listen, the owner, had his money paid up front for the year. The insurance paid for the airplane, and anyway, that was the end of that story. We've in the old days, we used to deal with a lot of crazy situations. It's not like that today.
What is one of the most expensive planes you sold?
A Boeing business jet.
Do you remember that story, how that went down?
Listen, it was in two parts because the airplane we sold was actually what they call green airplane. So meaning it comes out from the factory. It has no interior. It's just a metal can, basically.
So it's brand new.
It's brand new. And then you have to take it to another, what they call a completion center, and they complete the airplane. That whole process takes over a year to actually do the completion of the airplane. And so we bought the airplane. That was about $60 million, and then the interior was another $45 million. And so we actually oversaw the whole completion of the airplane. So the whole thing was over $100 million. I've since recently, I just sold an airplane for $84.5 million just recently. And but that one was the most long, it was a bigger one. It took longer because it was actually two-part, the acquisition and the sale of the airplane, and then the completion of the airplane. So it was a much bigger project.
What is going through your mind like during that period? I don't know how your structure works. Do you get commission or?
Yeah, we get paid a commission for the sale of the airplane. Then we got paid another fee for overseeing the completion of the airplane, because it was actually, we don't normally do that, but for a project like that, of course we're going to do it because it was a completed deal, was buying it and completing it for them.
What drives you during periods like that? Is it the money, or is it the delivery? What is the interesting part for you?
That's an interesting question, because in the early days of this was money. I needed to make money to live, but after a while, it's really it's the game, it's the challenge, dealing with the people I deal with, and really how much I'm going to make on a deal is not my number one or number two or even number three thing that comes to my mind when I'm actually talking to a client. I'm trying to understand who they are, what their needs are. Do we have the other side of the puzzle to put it together? Every deal is a challenge, and they're very cross-border. Most of our deals are international in nature. And the more I'm in this industry, the more interesting people I get to deal with. And I learn so much from them. And I try to sort of challenge them, ask them questions about their business, about their industry, about what they think about geopolitical situation, the financial, global situation. Because I'm always trying to learn and develop my own brain as far as challenge myself as I get older, and I'm getting older and older very quick. You want to keep your brain active, because if not, you just, you sort of whittle away. So that's really at the beginning, that's sort of my challenge. How do I win this person over? How do I get them to come into my camp? It's a game. It's really a game. And then of course it's okay. How much are we going to make on the deal? How do we stretch the fee we're going to make? Because obviously we're not here for charity reasons. We're, a capitalist business, but it's really not the number one thing I'm thinking about when I'm doing a transaction now.
You mentioned getting older. How do you look at one day, if you're potentially thinking about it, how do you look at retirement? Is that something you're looking to get into, or?
Never. And
Why?
it's interesting because I just came back from there's a gentleman named Peter Diamantis, who's he has a longevity conference, and what's going on in the world of longevity and anti-aging is incredible, really incredible. And so when I realized in my head that I can really extend my life for a lot more years and be healthy for a lot more years, there is the word retirement doesn't even come into my brain, because I plan on, unless I, God forbid, get hit by a car or crash on a plane, I am planning on living a long time, and I'm having too much fun in my life, man. I don't want to retire.
If you could go back to your younger self when you were working several jobs, like washing dishes, and give yourself one piece of advice with all the knowledge you have now, what would you say to yourself?
Well, whenever you think that, well, I'm not ready to do this yet, and I'm not, I don't have enough money yet to start my own business. I need to learn more about this industry. Bullshit. Okay. I mean, really, just pull the trigger. Pull the trigger. When you have an idea that you think so confident about, I mean, listen, there's really a few steps in it. The first thing, you have to have a curiosity mindset. If you are always thinking of ideas or things you want to do or what's going on in the world, you have to be curious. If you're not curious about anything, you're probably a pretty boring person. The next thing is you have to be passionate. You have to be passionate about something. Like me, like I said, I got up in my airplane. I was like, wow, this is incredible. I became immediately in my head passionate about airplanes, aviation. And then really having a purpose. Why? Okay, I want to be successful. I want to make money. I want to do these things in my life. I want to get out of this local little town. So really, if you have a curious mind and you're passionate, and then you have a purpose, wow. I mean, I wish I knew all that, and I knew to pull a trigger earlier in my life. I didn't start my own company until very, very late in my life. I don't regret anything I ever did, but I really think if I was really going to start earlier in life, yeah, I would have taken a chance on doing something on my own much, much earlier. And today, it's so much easier to do things on your own. I mean, you don't need to have any money. You get on the internet today, you can start a company, you can start buying products and selling products, and you don't even have to leave your bedroom, which is a whole nother story, because you should. You need to be a social person. That's a whole nother side. But it's so much easier today to really do something on your own.
Did you have, I'm thinking of during that period when we were young, did you have any mentors, since you didn't have a father figure in the picture, or?
Yeah, I mean, well, until I really graduated university, no. I didn't have any mentor. Of course, I would read books about people, but I never really had any mentor. Once I got onto my first job as a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., yeah, I worked for the guy who was running the organization. He was an unbelievable guy, Ed Stimpson, and so I learned a lot from him and the people, the executives that were around me. When I worked for this other guy who did corporate takeovers, he worked my ass off. He, killed me. But my God, I learned so much from him, and that was sort of my mentor in business and working harder. So, when people think that people being tough on them, I don't think they're being so tough on you. Think that they're educating you, and look at it as a positive thing, because unfortunately today, the world has gone a little too soft, and I don't want to get into a political conversation about being woke or not woke, but people got to be tough to get out there and survive on their own today. And you need to be slapped around. You need to have failures. You need to be told no. It makes you a tougher person later to deal with the realities of life.
Do you think you'd be here if you didn't meet those people and get in those rooms?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, I would love to say, yeah, something else would have happened. And, again, this word sliding doors or the butterfly effect, whatever they want to call it, everything happens at the flick of a finger. I mean, your whole life could change in a half a second. What you're going to do tomorrow, what you're going to do in an hour from now.
Just like that ride for you in the plane.
Yeah, just like I got in that airplane. That changed my whole life, So, I got the job as a lobbyist. I was was in the nightclub. I met a guy who sold jets. These things, you don't plan these things to happen. So, there's the term shit happens. I mean, and this is why I would go back a few minutes ago. I was saying, don't sit home on your computer, on your phone, get out there. Another thing, if you asked me what I had done differently, I mean, get out there. People who really find a passion for some industry, go out to the conferences that these industries have and meet people, walk up to the different booths that they have, in these conferences and talk to people. That's how things happen. It's not going to happen by sitting in your house and surfing the net and, looking on your phone, going out with your friends, partying all the time. If you really want to succeed in life, you got to get out there and knock on doors. And it's so easy today. There's conferences on every different subject or sector in the world. Go to them and just talk to people. You can't imagine what comes out of these situations.
What are your goals now going forward with both yourself, but also with the jet business?
Well, I want to expand this now to the U.S. because actually 60% of the business and 60% of our business is actually in the United States. So I should have a showroom in the U.S. So I'm working on that now. And then going another bigger picture from there is to actually maybe rebrand into a much more global distribution network. I don't want to get any further than saying that, but it's have an idea of what to take it to the next level. And there are these things that they call eVTOLs, which is electric vertical takeoff and landings, the flying cars. They're basically passenger carrying drones. That's the future. That's going to be starting in the next year or two. They're already test flying them now. So that's going to be a whole nother world. I think, listen, there's other business opportunities I'm working on, investments that I deal in. And I'm, like I said, I'm a learning or a sponge of trying to suck up information because the world's changing so much today that there's who knows what angle I'm going to want to expand to, in the future. But I'd love to expand this business so that I can get some other people involved in it and sort of I could step back a little bit from day-to-day connection and have somebody else doing it day-to-day and me be more of a, the figurehead or chairman or something like that.
If people want to get more information about you and what you do, where would be the best place?
Well, you can Google me and get a lot of information about me or on my social media because we've obviously social media has really gone crazy in the last 2-3 years. We've been super lucky with our social media distribution network. So if there's, you can learn a lot about our industry or about our business, about me through those methods. But if somebody wants to get a hold of us, just come to our website on the jet business and they can send an email right there to it. And I will get that.
All right, cool. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap this up.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for taking this time to talk to me.
Thank you for taking the time.